So we're excited to have our next speaker here with us. Like I said, we're going to hear a little bit more about NNSA. Dr. David LaGraffe is the Principal Assistant Deputy Administrator for Defense Program Research, Development, Test, and Evaluation at NNSA. The RDT&E program, lots of acronym, supports the design, certification, and assessment of the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile and provides the scientific foundation, infrastructure, and capabilities needed to support other nuclear security missions across the NNSA and the U.S. A retired Army colonel, he has served in a variety of military, nuclear, scientific, and R&D positions. Dr. LaGraffe holds a PhD in physics from Syracuse University. He is a graduate of the U.S. Army War College and has published 30 scientific and professional journal articles. Please join me in welcoming Dr. LaGraffe.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you this morning. And I hope you don't have any buyer's remorse on that, but we'll see. So very impressive new crop of fellows coming in. Very exciting, and congratulations to you. I have quite a few previous fellows working in my program at headquarters, but of course out in the national labs as well. I had a chance to flip through a brochure that Stephanie gave me that had some of the research that the fellows had done previous. I don't know if those people are here today, but a few of them caught my eye as really interesting things. Radiation belt remediation. That is a very interesting project. In my old job, I worked in defense nuclear nonproliferation, and we had a space program, and that would be something of quite interest to that field. Many-bodied quantum simulation for quantum computing. We're very interested in leveraging quantum computing moving forward. And I am a physicist, but I did see some good engineering in there too. Ultrasound inspection of additively manufactured parts. So lots of good work, at least in that brochure we saw, and I'm sure the people that are here today. So hopefully I saw some posters out there. I'll get some time to take a look at those and that sort of thing. So I do want to recognize that our academic and early career programs are vital as a pipeline to talent in our national labs. We don't have them right now in RDT&E, but in my previous position, I managed university programs for a dozen years or so. And so I can definitely appreciate the value that they provide to the NNSA and actually broader national security. And so my goal here today is to tell you about the RDT&E program, the NNSA, but to try to inspire you to consider working at the national labs or at headquarters as a career of national service. So, is it to the right? Here we go. Okay. All right. So I was in the grocery store last week, and I was in the checkout line, and there was a woman in front of me who had enormous bell bottoms on. And it really, there's not too many of us in this room that probably grew up in the 70s, but back then, bell bottoms were a big deal. And it kind of flashed me back to what things were like back then, and thinking about what we're talking about today. I'm old enough to remember actually going through air raid drills in school where we would line up in the hallways and cover our heads and things like this because we were really worried about nuclear war. And in fact, one of the reasons I went into the military, I joined junior ROTC in high school because I was going to defend the country against the USSR and do all that stuff. Of course, by the time I went on active duty in 1990, there was no USSR, but my career path had been set already. And so the wall falls down, we get the peace dividend, I think under the Clinton administration were the last times we actually had balanced budgets because of the peace dividend. And President Obama gives his Prague speech in 2009. There were, I don't know, 400,000 people at that speech. It was a huge crowd, and you know, it was a really exciting time for non-proliferation. I was on the team that helped negotiate the New START treaty with the Russians in Geneva, you know, where we reduced our deployed stockpile down to 1,550 weapons, and you know, it was really rosy. But it's shockingly how fast arms control has collapsed. We all know what's going on in the world today. Russia invaded Ukraine, and the minute they ran into trouble there, they started rattling the nuclear saber. Maybe just all talk, but who knows? Very concerning is the rapid development that's going on with China's nuclear program, both in terms of the modernization of their weapon systems, different delivery platforms, but also the increase in the numbers. We have a very, very difficult touch point with China in Taiwan. If something happens there, that could easily blow up in everybody's face. So we're entering a regime of new competition in the nuclear arena. And it's in its arena now where we really can't necessarily rely on a lot of the strictures that we had with the Soviet Union, where it was a bilateral, there was some kind of common sense approach between the two countries and negotiations and things like that. Now we have what a lot of people would say is a much more unstable situation with two nuclear peers. And so we're in uncharted waters, really. Of course, in the news, Iran, what's going on between Israel and Iran that we've gotten pulled into. And, we all know that we attacked Iran specifically to target their nuclear program. So, all that's to say is how important the U.S. nuclear deterrent is. It's vital to, of course, deter nuclear war. It reassures our allies, prevents broader war, in my opinion, and so we're really back. Everything's old is new. Bell bottoms are back in. Nuclear deterrent is unfortunately back in. Okay. So a little kind of context. When Jimmy Carter, President Carter, established the Department of Energy, one of the things he made sure he did was include, activities for supporting the nuclear stockpile within the Department of Energy. The optimist would say he did that to make sure that there was a cabinet-level person that would represent nuclear stockpile issues to the president. The pessimist would say he wanted to make sure that the Department of Energy didn't get disbanded easily because they took care of nuclear weapons. But whatever the reason, the NNSA is a kind of a semi-independent part of the Department of Energy. Nuclear weapons, it's a shared responsibility between the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. And you can see on the DOD side, it's about establishing the military requirements. And so that means things like the numbers of weapons, the types of weapons, the environments that the weapon needs to survive, all these types of things. They're responsible for developing the delivery weapons. Most of the weapons are in the hands of the DOD when the DOE delivers them, and so they secure and take care of them and do maintenance activities in the field. They have to train their personnel, these types of things. DOE, of course, we're the provider. We design, we build, we test, and deliver the weapons to the Department of Defense. There's a weapon development process that's well established. We call it the Phase X process within the NNSA. There's a Department of Defense instruction, 5033.55, that specifies all the steps that we have to go through for joint development. Because if you think about it, you know, the DOD, if they're developing a new delivery platform like Sentinel, new missile ICBM that's being developed, that thing takes, you know, quite a long time to develop. All major acquisition systems have issues, but we want to make sure we're latched up on the DOE side to deliver the proper warhead for Sentinel. So you've got two major acquisition systems that they have to stay in sync throughout the development process. A lot of that's done through the Nuclear Weapons Council. This is an executive level council that has representation from the DOD and the DOE. At the executive level, it's a 4-star representation, so that's the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, for example, for DOD. And on our side, it's the administrator of the NNSA, who's an undersecretary within the department, Senate confirmed position. And so even though we're part of DOE, we are semi-independent. Now, what that means isn't exactly clear. I usually say that means that there's two sets of rules, big DOE and NNSA, and whichever rule set is worse to follow, that's the one we have to follow. So. If I'm not pointing this the right way. Okay. So Stephanie showed this slide, so we should have done a better job coordinating, I guess, but that's okay. So just wanted to maybe reiterate a couple of things. Stephanie hit on these. I did work in global security for 15 years, so that's defense, nuclear non-proliferation. So securing, after the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a lot of special nuclear material around the world that was not secured properly, so a lot of efforts into doing that. Research and development for things like proliferation detection. For example, when Secretary Moniz went to do the final negotiations with Iran for the JCPOA, my office briefed him on the hyperspectral imaging capabilities that we had to be able to characterize what was going on with the Iranian program. Also in here is our counterterrorism and counterproliferation types of activities, or NA80. So that's an important part in global security. Naval nuclear propulsion, if you've heard of Admiral Rickover, that was where he was. He was a 4-star admiral. There's always a 4-star admiral there. And so they developed naval nuclear propulsion. And so on the emerging challenges, the one thing I'd like to say about that is our national labs, sometimes we call them the national jewels. So when we have a technical problem that the country needs to solve, this one of the first places they turn to are our DOE national laboratories. So those emerging challenges, it's not just nuclear, but it can run the gamut. We have a great S&T base at the labs. For example, when COVID occurred, Lawrence Livermore used our high-performance computing capability to do some modeling of the vaccine and with the Omicron variant, and they were able to recommend some very minor adjustments, or I'm not a biologist. They did something that allowed the vaccine to be effective against the Omicron variant as well. So, okay. So Stephanie showed this slide too, but what I'd like to say is that so we use a GOCO model, government-owned, contractor-operated, for managing almost all of the NNSA sites. And so that means you have a limited number of federal employees, people like myself and Stephanie, who are, kind of the, eyes on, hands off, and we have management and operations contractors in place that manage the actual site operations. And so we feel that this gives a good amount of federal oversight to make sure that the mission is getting accomplished and U.S. tax dollars are being spent efficiently, but it allows us to take better advantage of the freedoms that companies operate. So the labs are actually FFRDCs, federally funded research and development companies that allows them to have a window into some of the headquarter decision-making process because they're you know, a non-profit organization. And so that also gives us advantages with this model. We have so the labs we would call design agencies. They're responsible for designing weapons and new parts and things like this. And then we have production agencies like parts that are made at Kansas City National Security Campus or Y-12, places like this. And then Pantex, where we have everything assembled. And I don't want to forget NNSS, which is the old test site, Nevada National Security site, where I have done a huge amount of work over the years, and I love going out there. Okay. So, you know, when you're in this field and you're reading the casual literature, of course, you know, you read about the triad, ICBMs, sub-launched missiles and things like that. All that's being provided by the NNSA, where our mission is to protect the nation, allies, and partners by providing a responsive and resilient nuclear security enterprise. And our allies, you know, having come previously in the non-pro world, our policy of extended deterrence. So we maintain a nuclear stockpile, and we promise our allies they don't need to develop a nuclear stockpile. They can rely on us to do that. It's one of the best non-proliferation policies that we have. It really prevents a lot of countries from developing nuclear weapons. And of course, the more countries that have them, the more chances there are that something goes wrong. So within defense programs, RDT&E is just one of several other major programs. Stockpile management, that's the program that really does the production of the actual weapons. Right now, we have 7 programs of record going on. The world has changed again. 15 years ago, we had 1 program of record basically at a time, and those were what we call life extension programs, where we were taking an old weapon system, sprucing it up, and putting it back out in the field. Now we have 7 going on, okay? It's really putting a lot of stress and strain on the entire complex, both from our ability to, you know, design and certify, produce materials, and making the weapons. So, you know, there's a lot of stress at NNSA right now. We have a tremendous number of demands on us. That peace dividend that I talked about with President Clinton, we're paying for it now. We let these facilities get old. We thought we weren't going to be using them in the future. We're going to eventually, you know, global zero, right? Rocky Flats got shut down. That's where we made our pits or our primaries, which are the, you know, the spark, not the spark plug, but kind of the heart of initiating your nuclear weapon. And we didn't build a new one. So now we're making new pits at Los Alamos, which is a lab, but now they have a production responsibility. And so my point is, we have a lot of catching up to do. We have some very old facilities that are, you know, being held together by baling wire and chewing gum. So we have a lot of work to do. One of the other things we do in defense programs that doesn't get a lot of notice is Office of Secure Transport. So what they do is they move weapons from Pantex to various other places, and so you have a security force that goes with those. They're actually federal law enforcement officers and things like that, and they actually log about 2 million miles a year for those purposes. So, and then here's my program, RDT&E, where we support everything that Defense Programs does, but our key missions, the design, assessment, and certification. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about this. I have actually a really great job, and so I like to tell people. I tell people, like my wife, who's an artist, you know, I said, I have the world's most capable supercomputer. I have the world's most precise and reproducible laser, and I get to blow stuff up 1,000 feet underground and X-ray image it as it's happening out in Nevada. So I have a lot of cool stuff. So when I talk about our mission, so design is just what you expect, you know, design a new weapons system, but it also includes maybe designing new parts that need to be, that are aging in the stockpile, things like this, new materials, this type of stuff. Assessment is actually a very key activity, and one of the things that we're responsible for is the annual assessment of the stockpile. So the three national laboratory directors, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia, along with the commander of STRATCOM, annually write a letter to the president assessing the status of the nuclear stockpile. So the president gets notified each and every year that the stockpile is safe, secure, and reliable. And by reliable, I also mean militarily effective. Okay, that's kind of the STRATCOM side. But that happens every year. And that's not something that is just a, you know, Kentucky windage type of thing. There is a lot of S&T that goes into this. There's a lot of modeling. There's experiments that are done. So there's a whole, you know, it's like the iceberg. You know, the annual assessment you see here, but there's a huge underwater iceberg that supports how that is arrived to. And I can tell you, they take it very seriously. It's not a rubber stamp that they do each year. And sometimes they actually will, you know, really agonize over making decisions on what they say about the stockpile. And so, you know, the goal of my program is to ensure confidence in the stockpile today and the one we build for tomorrow. There's no clock up here. All right, okay. So, because I haven't even gotten to my program yet. All right, so, you know, I generally refer to my program as RDT&E, or in the budget world, it's SRT&E, Stockpile Research, Technology and Engineering. But many of you may hear it called Science-Based Stockpile Stewardship, or just, you know, Stockpile Stewardship. So that's our program. This was started by a gentleman called Vic Reese, very visionary person at headquarters, when the United States decided to sign on to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And so we weren't going to have the ability to conduct underground tests anymore. And Vic said, you know what, we have the computational capabilities, we have the data from 1,000 nuclear tests. We can use that to make sure that our stockpile stays safe, secure, and reliable. Okay. And so back then, we were spending a lot of money in investing in computational simulation modeling capabilities. Because at the time we say, yeah, we can just model it, you know. And then when actually you sit down and start doing it, you're like, oh, there's a lot of stuff we need to figure out, you know. So that was a big area of investment. And like I said, a lot of data from our underground test database. So today, I can say that our knowledge, ability to model nuclear weapons far, far exceeds what we understood when we were actually blowing them up in the desert, okay? Much more confident in our understanding of what's going on. We rely on some tremendous capabilities that we've developed since we started Stockpile Steward. We had some before too, but tremendous capabilities. I heard that some of you are planning on doing work at them, like the National Ignition Facility out at Livermore, the Z Machine at Sandia, DART, El Capitan out at Livermore, which just started doing classified computing earlier this year, and our great subject matter experts across the complex. But as I said earlier, we're facing a lot of significant threats. Two peer adversaries, they haven't been sitting idle. We have much more complex environments that we need to worry about now. The threat space that the weapons need to survive to make sure that they reach their target, and those complex defenses are much tougher than they used to be. It's a big change from when I was working on New Start in 2010. Our S&T capabilities moving forward, we need to keep improving them. We have challenges as our design space starts to migrate away from our underground test database. We want to make sure we have even better S&T capabilities so that we can certify those designs. We know we have gaps in our understanding of high energy density physics and our ability to produce those environments in our test facilities. NIF only gets us so far. Z only gets us so far. The requirements that are coming from the Department of Defense are coming in fast and furious. So we need to really be able to develop things more rapidly. We have challenges such as super hard targets. We saw what went on in Iran. We need more efficient ways to manufacture. As I said, our production complex is really challenged right now. We need to be more efficient at that. Some materials we don't want to work with anymore. We don't want to make beryllium spheres and things like this. So what S&T solutions can we provide for alternative materials? Some of the materials that were made not that long ago, I'm not sure that we can make them at all again anyways. The PFOAs that are getting banned around the country. Some of those materials are used, so we have to find replacements for those. So a lot of work like that. But one point about this is our S&T capabilities are tremendous, and it is actually a strategic deterrent. Part of the strategic deterrent is the S&T capabilities that we have, and our adversary's perception of us is that we're 10 feet tall in our abilities, and we want to stay that way going into the future. Okay, so let me talk about my program more explicitly. Hopefully, a lot of you will be working in these programs. So we have 3 offices in NA11. Office of Experimental Sciences, so think high energy density physics, and Office of Advanced Simulation and Computing, so supercomputers, and Office of Engineering and Technology Maturation, microelectronics, advanced manufacturing, flight testing, these types of things. There are 3 separate offices, but they are extremely interconnected, very well interconnected. Experimental science is providing a lot of the hard data that goes into the models that are used in advanced simulation and computing, and then they're tested and validated a lot in the Office of Engineering and Technology Maturation. So I like to say we have a model, test, assess cycle for what we do to support design, assess, and certify. So Office of Experimental Sciences, as I said, is providing the experimental data that underpins basically everything. Design, assessment, and certification. We have 2 programs in here. Assessment science. This includes primary performance, secondary performance, advanced diagnostics. We conduct subcritical experiments, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the second office does inertial confinement fusion, which generates the high energy density conditions at mainly 3 main facilities, of course, NIF, the Z machine, but also at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics, University of Rochester's Omega laser as well. So that's where we generate those environments. And we have a great partnership with a private company called General Atomics that makes a lot of the targets for all of these, not all, but makes the targets for the facilities, and they are an incredible performer as well. So a little bit in action. I said I get to blow stuff up underground. So out in Nevada, we have what we call the Pulse Laboratory. It's 1,000 feet underground. Right now, we have the Cygnus X-ray machine, and we conduct subcritical experiments. So we're very interested in the performance of our primaries in our weapon, but we signed up to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, so we do not generate nuclear yield from any of our experiments, so that's why they're called subcritical. We go right up to criticality, but never above. But by taking X-ray images through the implosion process, we can understand the performance of the primary. We are really expanding what's going on there. We're going to build another X-ray machine there called Scorpius. Scorpius will run at 22 MeV, I believe, which, you know, oh, you say 22 MeV, that's no big deal. But it's at 1.4 kiloamps. So it's a pretty impressive X-ray machine that will allow us to have multi-pulse. So think of, you know, X-ray, sort of a movie, choppy old-fashioned movie through the implosion process, and powerful enough to core punch and get through plutonium and other heavy metals. So that's some very interesting work there. The National Ignition Facility, of course, made history a couple years ago now. You can see our ignition shots that we've had out there. And do we have the last one in? Oh, no. So I will add that we're missing one, need to update this. We had 8 megajoule yield very recently with 2.05 megajoules going in. So that was our highest gain shot, which is, I'll get sidetracked here. That's actually important because when we run NIF at full yield, it really does a number on the optics. And so if we can, you know, still do what we need to do and run it at a lower input energy, we can save a lot of wear and tear on our optics and save me money. And just last week, Los Alamos had a new design of a Hall rum, which is, you know, kind of a gold cylinder that the laser goes into, bounces around in the inside, generates the X-rays that actually implode the target. The NIF uses a indirect drive approach. They designed a new hull room with 2 windows, and were able to extract X-rays during the entire implosion process, which is great for us because we want to eventually move NIF to being more, rather than an HED experimental platform, we want to be able to also use it as a tool to help certify and assess our weapons. And so that's a very important step forward for that. So that was a great success with Los Alamos, both getting their first ignition shot and being a step forward into that type of, making into that type of tool. One thing I forgot to add about Scorpius is that it's the world's first, it's an entirely solid state driven accelerator. So that's some really good accelerator engineering. High energy density physics, the ignition, suddenly there's like $6-7 billion of angel investors raining money down on all these fusion startups. And I just want to say that we do fusion research for national security reasons, right? We're not here to solve fusion energy, okay? And sometimes that gets a little lost in the hoopla, but that's our primary mission. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to help achieve fusion energy, and so we want to partner with these startups. They can also help us. Things like pulse power. There are several startup companies that are developing advanced pulse power approaches. So how can we partner with these companies to do tech maturation for our own purposes, help out the country achieve its fusion energy goals, and this sort of thing. So we do this through public-private partnerships. So it's a good target of opportunity. You know, I can tell you some downsides. These companies are hiring away our designers left and right. So you don't want to go work for them. You know, 5 years from now, they'll be out of business, but we'll still be here. So I think you're pretty familiar with our LRGF? Yeah, so you guys are pretty familiar with that. So, but maybe you're not as familiar with the NNSA Graduate Fellow Program. So this might be something that you want to consider after you've graduated from school. This is a great opportunity to spend a year working in Washington, D.C. Most of them are actually right at headquarters. You'll work in a program like mine, right? We just had a reception yesterday for our 4 new fellows in our office, but the other programs also have them. I think there's 70 or so this year. Get to spend a year working in DC, working in headquarters, and this is a great opportunity, not only for people that are interested in a federal career, but if your career goal is to work in a national lab, it's a great place to get hired by the national labs and have a year of DC experience under your belt, so that when you get to the lab and you need to write up a proposal for some work, you know how somebody like me is thinking back at headquarters, and so you tell me the right stuff and I give you money, right? So this is a very good opportunity to think about as a next step. Advanced simulation and computing. This is where high performance computing goes, and a lot of people say this is kind of the heartbeat of stockpile stewardship. As I said, it pulls in data from our underground test database, Office of Experimental Sciences. We have the integrated weapons codes, so when we take the entire weapon and model its performance, remember that assessment process I was talking to you about? So a lot of that is running that code to see how well the performance, how well the weapon performs. But there's also a huge amount of other codes that are part of the ASC program that support all kinds of activities, material performance, right? Boost performance, how high explosives are performing, all these types of things. So like this Paradise code looks at dislocation dynamics within materials and things like this. So it's not just like one code. It's actually, I'll say hundreds, but might even be more than that. But not only does this support the work that we do in RDT&E, but the other defense programs heavily rely on these models. So they leverage a lot of this work. Our codes are also leveraged by Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation and that counterterrorism counterproliferation. They're leveraged by the intelligence community and other parts of DOD. I would say even State Department and other organizations leverage these codes. We do think, for example, for the IC, capabilities for nuclear intelligence. So our designers attempt to model what foreign programs are doing based on intelligence information. So that's an activity. Seems like we can't talk about computers without talking about AI lately. And I like to say, AI, ML, it's been around a long time, right? It's almost like saying you do physics now, right? It's everywhere in science. But what the big hullabaloo right now is really generative and agentic AI. And so that's really something where we think that there are great opportunities to support our mission and our management practices. So there's a lot that can be done to help out kind of the federal management side of things. And we have people come in from industry and they're like, hey, OpenAI, we're going to be able to do everything for you. But we have a lot of security issues, critical nuclear design, weapon design information needs to be protected. These AI programs, if you ask them the wrong questions, they will generate classified information. So, we have been evaluating how to bring on these models safely, how we can operate them on secure platforms. Our partners in NA80 are evaluating these models for proliferation concerns. Can some guy sitting in his basement figure out how to make a nuclear weapon out of it? So we're red teaming them. We're looking at helping companies be able to put guardrails in place so that it won't respond to those types of information. So there's a ton of work on that. And another aspect for directly applying it to NNSA purposes is that our data, very important data, sometimes is on an old system, the metadata is not well established, and so there's a lot of work to do. We definitely see the promise, and we're working on it, but it's not like we can just hire AWS and deploy a system. Okay. We see that it has possibilities in discovery of new materials. Like I mentioned, let's replace beryllium, or let's replace TATB, these types of materials. Help with design optimization. Got a lot of design optimization problems. Manufacturing and certification. If we're gonna make a new part, or the yield. The yield, what I mean by that is we produce 10 parts, they get inspected, maybe only 30% of them are worthy to go into a nuclear weapon. So that's a very time and labor intensive process, not just because you throw out 70% of your parts, but inspecting each one is a lot of work. And so we think AI, computer vision, those types of things will really help us in there. And then one of the things that we do in stockpile management is the surveillance program. We take weapons out of the stockpile every year, take them apart, see what's happening. Is it rusting? Is that HE cracking? Is the weapon system degrading? And so we think that there are opportunities in AI for, say, building digital twins, these types of things that can help us assess as weapons age. So Stephanie touched on this. ASC has a academic alliance program. This is mostly working with the academic community. So I'll say about that. And they also have a fellowship program, computational science graduate fellowship program. Is that part of this? Okay.
It's not part of this meeting, but Krell manages that.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
yeah.
right. And this is run jointly with the Office of Science, who of course was a partner, not of course, but was a partner with NNSA for the exascale program that ended up deploying El Capitan. And finally, my third office, engineering and technology maturation. And some of the very important things we're doing in here are, for example, microelectronics. And that might be another area where you think, well, industry can do that for you, right? But we need secure fabrication, and it needs to be strategically rad hard. So that's not a chip that Micron is going to be making you, okay? And it's not a chip you can buy from Taiwan. So that's an important area for us. We have a secure strategic rad hard facility called Mesa at Sandia that produces those chips. But if you're, somebody was saying they were looking at wideband, so that it's expensive to keep fab facilities updated. I won't tell you our length scales that we're operating on at Mesa right now. You'd be like shocked. So we've got 3 offices here. One I just mentioned microelectronics, those types of things. We do advanced manufacturing development, and this is where we've just stood up rapid and advanced capabilities in response to what I was saying earlier from the DOD about their really urgent needs to have capabilities that in the past we would have taken 15 years to deliver on. They want in 3 to 5 years. So this office in action, stockpile responsiveness program on the bottom there. This program does some really cool stuff. This is about exercising all the steps from design to building to testing. And so we have things in here like flight testing. We work with a couple of commercial space launch systems, and we can put systems onto their rockets, test them out in those environments. You know, the vibration, the G-loading, these types of things that you get on a rocket launch, our weapons need to be able to survive those things. And so this is an opportunity for us to test them. We do advanced certification. So like I said, when we need to replace a part in the weapon system that maybe is not aging well, they're responsible for getting it certified. They also do knowledge management, which is, take for example, the videos of above ground tests. Our researchers are still using those videos. They're still valuable. But a lot of them are like, on film. We need, get the American Film Institute in here and, save some of these films. So we've spent money digitizing those films. There's a lot of old data that's in hard copy, in notebooks, in reports, and things like this. So knowledge management is another thing we do within this program that's very valuable. Yeah, and so here's just to highlight our rapid capability from design, build, and test. I think that's a crossbow launch on the right there, where we put a package with several new technologies that we want to test under these types of environments. We just signed a charter with the 3 labs and defense programs on this rapid capability approach. This is really, I want to just emphasize, it's a bit of a sea change. Like I said, normally this is like a 10, 15-year process where it's very controlled step by step. And now we're going to stand up matrixed teams and we're going to empower them. And you're like, well, isn't that just modern management, LaGraffe? Yeah. So we're going to try it out because it's something we haven't done before. So because we need to deliver. And just to say that, RDT&E underlies almost everything that the NNSA does. So whether you're doing research in high energy density physics or some particular field, you're really contributing to the greater whole. We want to innovate proactively. We have to establish strong partnerships, right? We want to do as much technology push as we get technology pull from our partners, and we need to demonstrate capabilities. A lot of if you're the program manager for a program of record, so a new weapon system, the W93, you're the program manager for it. Your metric is to deliver that weapon on time. Right? And so your risk tolerance for accepting new technology is minimal, right? And so we need to partner so we can demonstrate capabilities. The people that are managing those programs say, yeah, that would be a great advantage to our capabilities or our safety or the reliability. Let's integrate that new technology in, okay? Might be one of the hardest challenges that we have in our program. And just to foot stomp, RDT&E program, it's a lot of money, $4 billion a year in the next presidential request, but we steward the S&T capabilities for the entire complex. So I like to say, we take care of the vineyard so that when NA12 needs to come and buy a bottle of wine, it's available for them to buy it. Because otherwise, it wouldn't be there. You can't just stand up a capability in S&T overnight, right? So we're the caretakers of the vineyard. So I think I'll stop there. Probably bored you, but if I have time, I'll be happy to answer any questions.